For thousands of years, we've thought of silver as treasure, right? Something you'd find in a pirate's chest. But what happens when that treasure suddenly becomes the single most critical ingredient for our entire future? Well, you get a perfect storm. And that's exactly what's brewing in the silver market. After a truly historic run in 2025, we're going to break down the powerful forces that could define everything in 2026.
Okay, let's just jump right into the deep end. Could silver really hit these kinds of numbers? I mean, $100, $200, maybe even $300 an ounce? And look, we're not just pulling these numbers out of thin air. We're talking about heavy hitters like Bank of America, floating forecasts that go as high as $309. So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? And what could possibly justify a price like that? Let's dig in.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we have to talk about the insane price explosion we all saw in 2025. Then, we'll get into how silver's whole identity is changing. After that, we'll look at the massive supply problem that nobody seems to be able to fix. Then, we'll check out the big global events that are just fanning the flames. And finally, we'll put it all together for the 2026 outlook.
So let's set the stage, because you really can't understand the story of 2026 without first looking at the absolutely transformative, record-shattering year silver had in 2025.
So get this, the big number, the one that made everyone's jaw drop, was a gain of nearly 150% in a single year. Now, to put that into perspective, that's not just a good year. That is the best year silver has had since the wild inflation of the late 1970s. It just blew almost every other major asset completely out of the water.
And wow, just look at this chart. This tells the whole story, doesn't it? You can see the price just goes parabolic. It's like a rocket ship taking off in late 2025, shattering every previous record we had. This is what the analysts call price discovery. And really, all that means is we're in totally new territory. Nobody knows what it's worth anymore, and the market is in a mad scramble to figure it out. This wasn't just a rally, it was a total reevaluation. So, what the heck caused this?
Well, that brings us to the real heart of the matter. It's this massive, and maybe permanent, shift in what silver is. It's not just treasure anymore. It's technology.
Okay, this right here, this is where it all clicks into place. Just look at this breakdown. That huge slice of the pie, almost 60%, that's industrial use. That is the whole ballgame right there. Silver isn't mainly for fancy silverware and coins anymore. No, it is now, above all else, a critical industrial metal.
And we're not talking about just any industry. This demand is coming from the absolute biggest tech revolutions happening on the planet. We're talking solar panels, we're talking AI data centers, electric cars, 5G, the whole shebang. And in these applications, silver's unique properties make it basically irreplaceable. That's why they call this demand inelastic. These industries have to buy it, pretty much no matter how high the price goes.
Yeah, this quote really just nails it, doesn't it? Silver has completely evolved. It's not just a just-in-case asset to hedge against inflation anymore. It's now a strategic mineral. It's literally the lifeblood of the green energy revolution and the AI future we're all building. Okay, so demand is absolutely exploding. That's one half of the story. Now let's talk about the other half, supply. Because this is where things get really, really tight. The key idea here is something called a structural deficit. And all that means is that for 5 years straight, the world has used more silver than all the mines on the planet have been able to pull out of the ground. Think about that. This isn't a one-off thing. It's a chronic problem. And it means we're just burning through our global savings of silver, year after year. And here's the kicker. The real reason they can't just ramp up production. You'd think with prices this high, they just mine more, right? Wrong. Over 75% of silver doesn't even come from actual silver mines. It's just a byproduct they find when they're mining for copper, lead, and zinc. So it doesn't matter how high the price of silver goes. They can't get more out of the ground unless the world also needs a lot more copper. The supply is basically handcuffed to other metals. It's just stuck.
Now, it's tempting to think, oh, this sounds like that Hunt Brothers squeeze back in 1980, but it's a totally different animal. Back then, it was all about a couple of rich guys trying to corner the market, pure speculation. This time, it's not speculators. It's the biggest tech and energy giants in the world who need the physical metal to build their products. That creates a way stronger foundation for the price.
So you've got this tinderbox, right? Exploding demand, crippled supply, and then a whole series of global events came along and just poured gasoline all over it. All through 2025, you had the Fed cutting rates, which made the dollar weaker and things like silver look way more appealing. You had central banks around the world buying up gold like there was no tomorrow. Then, the BRICS nations started testing out their own gold-backed currency, a direct challenge to the dollar system. And as if that wasn't enough, a major geopolitical flare-up at the end of the year sent investors scrambling for the safety of hard assets. It was just one thing after another.
So you combine that fundamental supply and demand squeeze with all that macro chaos, and you get rocket fuel. That powerful combination is exactly what's setting the stage for 2026, and it's why the experts are telling us to buckle up for a wild ride.
So what are the big banks actually saying for 2026? Well, everyone seems to agree the price is headed up, but nobody agrees on how high. You've got Goldman Sachs targeting up to $100, Citi's at 110, and then you have Bank of America with this absolutely massive range that goes all the way up to $309. When you see a spread that wide, it tells you one thing. We are in uncharted waters. The market has no idea where the top is.
But of course, it's not a one-way street. There are definitely things that could throw a wrench in the works. What if the next Fed chair is super aggressive about fighting inflation? What if we hit a surprise global recession and that industrial demand dries up? And you can never, ever forget, silver is famously volatile. The price can drop just as fast as it can rise. You got to be ready for that.
And all of this brings us back to the biggest question of all. Forget the day-to-day price swings for a second. The real story here is about a fundamental change. So, is this it? Is this shift permanent? Has silver truly transformed from a simple precious metal into an absolutely indispensable strategic mineral for generations to come? Because as we've just seen, the answer to that is now a multi-$100 question.